Brown says, get that India. Big boy.
Call an ambulance! Maybe call a priest! Oh, what a shot! What a shot! Campbell killer!
Welcome back to another edition of the Tip Sheet Podcast. As always, I'm your host, John, also known as 4020, joining me for a back-to-back recording as we go across Tuesday and Wednesday night on a short week with Thursday Night Footy. Is my good mate Sixties, big fella. It's preview podcast time, and we got 4 games this week because it is the inaugural edition of the Harvey Norman Women's Premiership for our Parramatta Eels. The competition itself has been around prior to this year, but the Eels, as their own entity, having their first game this week, and that is very, very cool stuff.
Yes, well, of course, the Eels have a couple of other clubs in the catchment area that play in the Harvey Norman, that being Wenty and Mounties. So we've had Eels Pathways players that have linked with those two clubs in the past, probably are still linking with those clubs as well. I haven't had a look at their rosters, but what we do know is that the inaugural Eels Harvey Norman Women's Premiership team is absolutely chock-a-block full of Eels Pathways players, which is a tremendous thing as far as the development club ethos is concerned. But, mate, you talk about being a jam-packed podcast, a preview podcast with 4 grades. Have you been checking out, I know it's your site, but have you been checking out the absolute deluge of content that is there for our readers on TCT right now?
Yeah, it's been raining good reads, actually. We've got some anti-sledging content. We've got some good stuff from the stands by Shelley. Obviously, all the usual stuff that we have, Team List Tuesday and whatnot in the podcast. But, yeah, TCT's humming along nicely right now.
Oh, in a really quick turnaround week, it is... I guess it's going to take a magnificent effort from readers and listeners to keep up with everything that's being churned out there. And we're going to make it that little bit more challenging by getting out this preview podcast by tomorrow morning. And so you'll be probably getting this in early Thursday morning on match day. There'll probably be goals preview that's there. And then, of course, and we have to make sure we mention this, we are there at Parramatta Leagues Club, the home of the Eels, for our pre-game podcast appearance in the bistro with special guest David Lydiard. Now, David is a fine ambassador for the club. He's a premiership winning winger with the Eels, played overseas. He's got lots of great stories, does tremendous work for the Indigenous community. And we've had him as a guest before. He's a champion bloke to talk to. He's a champion bloke for any Eels supporters that's there. Well, you don't have to be an Eels supporter. You could be a South supporter in the club. He'd be more than happy to have a photo, sign some autographs, have a bit of a chat with you. So get to the bistro at Parramatta Leagues Club. We're on at 5 o'clock tomorrow. Before the big game, you'll have a chance to have a listen to us in the bistro, in that preview podcast, and still get over and catch at least half of the New South Wales Cup curtain raiser to the first grade. So look forward to seeing you there. And as we always say, come along, introduce yourself, say good day. We love meeting new listeners or people that are listeners that we're meeting for the first time. So, yeah, really looking forward to that, John.
Yeah.
And of course, before we go any further, and we say our thanks to Parramatta Leagues Club for their continued support of the Cumberland Throw with our live appearances, but also our thanks to Star Partners Real Estate, Auburn, Narellan and Parramatta for their ongoing and long-term support of the Cumberland Throw. Greg and the team, they're not just big supporters of the Cumberland Throw, they are massive Eels supporters. So show your support for Star Partners Real Estate, Auburn, Narellan and Parramatta. And John, I guess now it's time to jump into our very first ever Harvey Norman Women's Premiership match preview.
Yeah, the last thing our preview pods need is even more content, given how much we waffle on with just 3 games. But starting this week, obviously, we've got the HNWP coming online, and then a month later, the NRLW also comes on board. So we're going to have to start mincing our words a little bit more sharply, I think. But really looking forward to this one, 60s. 3 o'clock p.m. out at 4 Pines Park, Sydney on Saturday, the 6th of July. Manly Warringah Seagulls hosting the Parramatta Eels. So a bit of here we go again, Manly and Para, for the inaugural clash for the Eels in this competition. And I believe maybe the Seagulls as well. I think they might be part of the expansion as well. So looking at the Seagulls team, I do recognise one name in Chantel Stowers, their captain in the centres, 60s. You might remember her as a former NRLW Eel. And then looking across the rest of their team, no one I really recognise here, but that doesn't mean it's not a good squad. But looking at our girls, of course, starting at fullback, you got Yasmin Baker, one of our development players in the NRLW, Debbie Dwahi on one wing, a fullback in the Tarsha Gale this year, with Shay Shipton, another import for the Eels on the other flank. Bella Sanford, another Gale graduate, is in the centres alongside Rory Owen, who was one of our NRLW players. Talara Bamblet, another one of our Pathways players at 5'8". Talara, real talent there. She'll partner Sarah Dimmick in the halves. Front row sees former Seagull Tafa'o Asua joining the Blue and Gold, starting as a bookend there, alongside one of the breakout players of the season in 2023 in Tyler Amiatu. Chelsea Makira, another big recruit for the Eels. She's at number 9, dummy half. In the back row, you see Chloe Jackson and young gun Talisha Maiva, who will captain the team when obviously she's doing very well to be in a position to captain the team. Talisha, one of those pathway graduates for the Eels, back in season 2022, I believe, 60s, as part of a team that went 1 game and 2 points short of a grand final berth in the Tarsha Gale. It was a very good team, and you're seeing a lot of those talents in this particular squad here, so well done to Talisha. At lock, which is, I suppose, the fullback of the forward pack, is Raishi Fa Masuli, another recruit for the Parramatta Eels. Then on the interchange, plenty of local talent here. Rafaela Perigo, who was excellent in the Tash Gale this year as a 5'8". Then we see Lasalio Sita Payne coming back to the club as a prop. Lasalio was fantastic in season 2021 before departing the Eels, so good to have her back in the fold. Alicia Bell, one of the best boots I've seen in the female pathways, especially, but on both sides of the ball there for boys and girls. She's on the interchange alongside Ashley Pottinger, who will be the dummy half / lock forward utility, I imagine. Extended bench features Kayana Lekeni, Liana Dimmick, who are both pathways players for us, and Aliti Namose or Namoche. So sorry, Aliti, if I get that one wrong there, but she is a recruit from the Dragons.
Yeah, so as you've just run through, there's quite a few players there that have come through the Eels pathways. Now, what I saw of them in the opposed session was very, very encouraging. But what was even more encouraging was they had a 16-8 trial victory over the Cronulla Sharks. Now, we know that Cronulla has long been one of the strongholds of women's rugby league and have been involved as a club a lot longer than what the Eels have been in senior women's rugby league. So for them to get a positive result in the trial against the Sharks is very encouraging for the season. Now, we don't know too much about Manly, as you said, and I guess what we can base an early tip on might be the relative strengths of both clubs at that Tarsha Gale level. And you'd have to say then that the Eels have had stronger Tarsha Gale teams than what the Manly Sea Eagles have had. And I guess on that basis, and with not too much else to go on, you'd have to be thinking that the Eels would be going into this match as favourites.
Mm-hmm.
What is going to be interesting is that mix that you ran through of players that are are members of the NRLW squad, along with the players who are those development players that have come through the Eels pathways. So I think you've got a good mix of players that they're expecting will be able to play up at the next level, as well as and this year, as well as players who are maybe a year or two away from being regular NRLW players. So how they combine will be interesting. It'll be, look, I think it's probably, as I said, going to be an Eels win. in this match, but how they're going to play it, that's what we're going to find out a little bit more about over these first couple of weeks of the season.
Yeah, I think that's a pretty good summation, mate. It's a good team on paper, like we spoke about on the news podcast, which came out today or Wednesday as of recording, but we record on Tuesday night. It's good to see the club really getting into that ethos of being a development club, and I think that's reflected really well in the composition of his squad, and they've done a good job augmenting that with some external talent. We talked about Baker, Owen, Shipton, Sarah Dimmick, Makira at dummy half, Asua in the front row. You know, that's exactly what you need to do in your development club. You have a whole raft of talent across the board, and then you go out and find the other spots that you need externally. Done a good job, which means, you know, it's not guaranteed they're going to be winning lots of games in the Harvey Norman Women's Premiership, but it's a great basis to develop a platform for the NRLW. So keen to see how they go against the Seagulls on Saturday. Don't know a lot about the spine here, 60s. That's probably the most interesting part for me, is that Baker, obviously we know Talaro at 5'8", but Baker, Dimmick of the Sarah variety, and Makira at Chelsea, they're all new faces for us. So not sure how their combinations are and how they're going to, you know, work with the other aspects of the team, the other parts of the, you know, roster in terms of back rowers, props, etc. But it's going to be exciting. And, yeah, hopefully they can start with a win. It's a tough road trip. You know, 4 Pines is going to be difficult out there, but they had a good trial result, and I think they can start the season strongly.
Yeah, look, I think there's a couple of players that are going to be interesting to watch, but in week one, my main watch is going to be on Chelsea Makira, because I think she's a great acquisition for them to get from, I believe, the Bulldogs club, because I know she was playing in their Taja Gale team last year and was one of the key players. I think she was playing halfback for their Tarsha Gale team, but then went into the representative games playing in the dummy half role. So we've obviously recruited her based on the work that she was doing in the representative games in that dummy half role. But I guess she offers as well that versatility to be able to play in the halves if needed. The halfback, Sarah Dimmick, I believe, is from the Central Coast, and was quite not just a good rugby league player from up there, but has been a valuable member of their community up there, receiving different awards for her work. So, it'll be interesting to see how that spine functions. But for mine, I think the key player to keep a lookout for is definitely Makira. Well
said, mate. And that brings us to the next game. And this one will be taking place also on Saturday at 1:00 p.m. out of Kellyville Park. So I suppose technically, if you're not really adhering to speed limits and you get good traffic, you can make it from the conclusion of the Jersey Flegg to the start of the Harvey Norman Women's Premiership. I would not advise it under any sort of safe conditions. But 1:00 p.m. sees the Parramatta Eels hosting the South Sydney Rabbitohs, like I said, out of Kellyville Park. I imagine they'll be on the top oval 60s, given that there is construction taking place for the grandstand and community facilities on the bottom fields.
Well, there basically would be nowhere for you to watch as a spectator.
Yeah, exactly.
If it was on the other fields.
Exactly. So. But yes, Eels, they have to have this 160s. They're 3 games adrift to the top 6 after dropping games against the top 3 teams in the Raiders and the Knights in successive weeks. They're really going to rue that game against the Raiders, I feel, where they should have won. But now, 3 games adrift, meaning they have to pretty much, win most of their games, if not all their games, to the conclusion of the regular season. And to do that this week, they look like this. At fullback, it's Arpa Twiddle. On the wings, Moe Al-Madine and Ollie McCarthy making his Flegg debut. Mentioned on the team, the NRL and Team List podcast. Ollie played fullback in the SG Ball this year. Came in mid-season, actually, and ended up doing a pretty good job, solidifying his position as the preferred number 1 in that grade. Now makes his Flegg debut. In the centres, looks like there's a bit of a clerical error here on New South Wales Rugby League, but they've got a Raz number on his lonesome in number 4, but if I do recall correctly, we had Antioch Vitala Mariner making his return this week in the number 3. So he was out for a week, I think maybe via concussion, you're saying, 60s from the week before. Nice inclusion there. Antioch's been a rock-solid centre for the Eels this season. In the halves, Matty Hunter partners Joshua Lynn. Front row sees Sam Tuivasa, Yaya Ayachi, and Tinkin Brown as the 8 to 10. Back row sees the two of the Stratus boys, Raf and Dom, on the edges. Sax and Pryke named at lock forward. Something to monitor those 60s, and also we'll talk about it shortly, but he is named to play New South Wales Cup as well. So pending the minutes he gets tomorrow night on Thursday could influence his availability for this game, but provisionally he has been named to play. On the interchange, you see Paddy Spence as the dummy half utility, Max Tupou, Tyrese Lakenny, and Damascus Nemia as the forward reserves. No replacement players named, although the Rabbitohs have 4 players in reserve for this game, so they've gone for the full extended bench there. And if I look at their team, any interesting players? Di Bartolo, that's a baseball name. No. We've got a Sullivan, a Plaff. I wonder if he's in relation to Max Plaff up at the Dolphins. Noah Reid in the back row. Interesting. And Joshua Alzahim, 60s. I didn't realise he'd gone to the Rabbitohs, but Josh Alzahim. So 2 former Eels playing on the edges for the Rabbitohs this week.
Yes, and was not that long ago that the Eels had the measure of the Rabbitohs quite convincingly for a Rabbitohs home game. It was, in fact, might have been the Eels was only maybe the first or second win of the season.
Yes, that sounds right.
Rabbitohs.
Yeah.
So, look, hopefully they can get a repeat performance here. Look, pleased to see, again, more players from the SG ball getting a run. Where you mentioned there Ollie McCarthy, who's moved from playing fullback in the SG ball to getting his first taste of Jersey Flegg on the wing in this match. We've had, Tyrese has had a game or two already, but good to see him continuing to get game time in this grade. The way that we're going to find out about the players that are in our pathway system is when they are elevated and they get game time. It's what we've been advocating. It's good to see that the club is taking the stance that we want them to take, which is let's have a look at who is in our systems, what they are capable of. Mm-hmm. And where we've been getting that number of players that are getting their taste of Jersey Flegg. Certainly we'd like to see Dom Farrugia as well get a taste of Jersey Flegg football this year. Based on the way that the Eels handled the Rabbitohs last time, I'm still going to suggest that there's going to be a win for the team this week. Arpa had been playing really well in that 5/8 role, but with a few changes to the team, he's now reverted back to the fullback role. Josh Lynn is always a big inclusion in the halves in this team. And he's had some weeks up in New South Wales Cup. I think he was back in Jersey Flegg from memory last week, but his inclusion in the Jersey Flegg team gives them some good direction in the halves. I thought Faitala Mariner had been playing quite consistent football before he had to have some time out, as we believe it was through concussion protocols. Mohamed Alamuddin he's brought a lot of he's just really good in yardage, isn't he? And that was something at the early part of the season that the team was missing. And not only that, he's a try scorer. So anytime you've got a winger who can not only combine doing those dirty yards, but also
two of the foundational tenets, isn't it? Yeah.
You know, that's it's what you want. So he ticks a couple of big boxes there as a winger. The pack, I think Tiancum Brown has had quite a good season. We saw what Sam is still capable of in that all too brief appearance in the 19s Origin game, but he'd also been building towards that in the second half of this season in Jersey Flegg. So we need him to continue on with that. The Twins, we know what they're like. They're workaholics. Saxon, so we have that question mark beside him based on how many minutes he's going to get in New South Wales Cup. So And apart from that, we've seen, Paddy Spence was there on the bench at the early part of the season, and it's good to see him back. He's a very versatile player, Pat. When he's on the bench, you don't just cover the dummy half, but he's got that capacity to play pretty much anywhere on the back line as well. So I think the probably the position that is toughest for them, and it's this is not meant as a slur in any way against Archie or Paddy, is that the high energy of Riley Smith, because he's probably been, I guess, one of the instrumental players in the team this year. So they don't have him this week because he's been elevated to New South Wales Cup, which is, again, this is what we want to see. We want to see players continue to be elevated, because not only do we then get a look at them in a higher grade, but it also opens up the space in the grade they've come from for players to be getting game time. Again, more pathways players, so you get more of an idea about them as well. So we just don't want to see players warehoused, do we? And I mean, I'm not talking, and when I say that, I mean, it sounds like they're deliberately left out of game time, but that's not the case.
No, well said, mate. It's kind of like the reverse of the trickle-down impact of injuries and suspensions. This is like the trickle-up impact, opening doorways for more players by promoting young guys up the pathway. So fully in accordance with you there, and I think that what we're seeing in the Flegg team is a good start as we start to see some of those SG ball boys get their looks in. And we mentioned Ollie McCarthy this week, and obviously on the bench, Tyrese Lakenny. So there's guys that are getting their looks, and that's a positive thing, which takes us to the double header on Thursday night at Combank Stadium. Sees the Eels in action in two grades across New South Wales Cup and NRL, starting with reserve grade, the knock-on effect New South Wales Cup. Parramatta Eels, one single solitary win outside the top 660s. That is impossible, almost impossible to believe that statement is real, given where they started this season, but they've worked damn hard to get there, and now we just need to make those final steps to secure a spot in the upper brackets of the ladder. To do that, they will take on the Rabbitohs this week. 5:20 p.m. kickoff. This one will not be broadcast on New South Wales Rugby TV, so if you want to catch it, you've got to be out there in person at Combank Stadium. And obviously, if you're watching us live at the Bistro, you're going to miss a good 20-30 minutes of this game, so bear that in mind. Eels, though, backing up a huge bounce-back win against Newcastle Knights, 30-8 on the road at McDonald Jones Stadium. Last week. And they look like
and
this.
John, can I just say, I highly recommend people come and see us. As much as I love the New South Wales Cup, we're there. Come and see us.
Exactly.
Come and see us in the club.
Not quite a once-in-a-lifetime experience, but, something similar.
Yeah.
But, yeah, to get that backup win now as they look to put a foot into the top 6, the Eels look like this. Not too many changes, although there are a couple of NRL debutants that have met. Nathan Kalis has had to reshuffle the team a little bit. Zach Sini at fullback, Lorenzo Mulatalo and Isaac Lumi on the flanks. Morgan Harper will partner the returning Samuel Luizio in the centres. In the halves, it's Dejan Arce and Ethan Sanders, so Eels' first choice there at 6 and 7. Front row sees Makesi Makatoa dropping back from NRL this week to take on reserve grade duties. He partners Wideramu Greg in the front row. Manny Luke starts this week, no Joey Lussick. So Manny is the number 9. Back row sees Dan Keir captain the team on one edge. Jock Brazel getting the start with Charlie Guymer caught up to the NRL. So well done to Jock getting a start there in reserve grade. Luca Moretti is the lock forward as the Eels go real beefy across their 8, 10 and 13. That's a good, powerful look for their middle forwards there. Interchange, you mentioned him before talking about the Flegg 60s, but Riley Smith holds his place down in Cup this week after scoring a great solo try against the Knights in round 17. Brock Parker and Saxon Pryke give a further flavour of youth to the interchange as the Eels continue to adhere to that mantra you've been talking about promoting the young guys and seeing what they've got. And rounding out the interchange is Reece Alderton. No reserves name for this one. I'll be interested to see who does warm up, because sometimes they give you an indication who could be in the mix. Sam Tuivasa was that guy last week, so hopefully he can get into the fold here sooner rather than later. Looking at this South Sydney team, we've got at least one player missing on the team sheet. No, 2 players missing on the team sheet per New South Wales Rugby League. But Jai Gray, we saw a little bit of him in the NRL this year. There's Leonard Skelton, who I believe is a cousin, perhaps, of Gerald. Then we have Buddy Gordon running around still prop and captain. So well done the Buddy there. And beyond that, no one of real note here. South Sydney running 11th on the ladder in terms of wins and losses. The Eels have finally tipped the scales positive. So they're broken even. I thought they were positive. 8-8 on the season. South Sydney 4-10. So despite only being 2 ladder places behind the Eels, there is a bit of a gulf in terms of wins and losses. So Parramatta should enter this one as firm favourites, but these are the ones you can't trip over, 60s. Because they've got plenty of good teams they have to beat en route to the finals or potentially making the finals, which means you've got to get your business done against the teams below you on the ladder.
Yeah, and they did get the job done against the Rabbitohs last time they faced at Accor Stadium, although I think it wasn't all one-way traffic from my recollection, but they did get the job done. Buddy Gordon, what is he? Is he about 38?
I think so. He has
that?
been around forever. The modern-day Cliff Lyons of the reserve grade. Elaine Gordon.
I think he debuted in the north, somewhere in the mid-noughties.
He turned 37 this year, so a year younger than we'll give him credit for. But he has been around what feels like forever. Like 2005, he debuted for South Sydney.
Yeah.
2005, so goodness.
So, look, credit to him that he's still running around as well. And given that he's starting, even more so. Now, look, Samuel Luizio, he's probably still sitting up near the top of the try scorers list for the Eels.
Because he bagged a couple of he bagged a couple of big hauls early on. Let me just see if I can pull up the stats for the Eels here. In terms of tries, see the full table. Isaac Lumi leads the job for the Eels right now. He's played 13 games, scored 10 tries. That's a good strike rate. But below him, you got Zach Sini, 9 tries. Isaac Tungle, 9 tries. And then, do I see... There we go, Sammy. So he's coming 30th in the competition. 6 games, 6 tries. So he's got a perfect strike rate.
Yes, but I think, didn't he get bagged?
He bagged 4 or 5 in one game. Let me pull his player profile now, and I'll tell you.
I thought it was the very first
game against the Bulldogs. We lost by 2. He bagged the triple Hattie, Pfeiffer, the old Michelle Pfeiffer, and then he got a go in the breakthrough win against the Bears. He also scored a try.
Yeah. So he's back in the team, very familiar with the players that he has around him. But obviously, there's the Eels have really gone down in terms of player availability in the top 30. So what have we got there? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. We've got about 6 top 30 players in the team there.
When you would hypothetically have 13 plus development players available. So, yeah, it's not ideal right now for the Eels.
Yeah. So, and of course, Ethan is, he's development player, and there's players there who are below the development. They might be on full-time contracts, but they're not development contracts. So, like a train and trial sort of arrangement. So, but yes, look, Luke has done pretty well. Also this year, he's been a good foil for Matt Arthur when he's come off the bench for him, and I thought he went really, really well last week starting the game. He came off the bench as well when Joey Lussick was there in that awful game at Granville Park with in that loss to the Raiders. That was. I've probably said it more than enough times. It was one of the worst games of football I've ever seen. But last week was a really positive bounce-back game. I mean, we're not just talking about the result of the game. It was the way that they played last week. It was very, very positive. I'm not sure what the completion rate ended up being, but it was way better than the 40-something% that they had against the Raiders. So we just need to see more of the same, because the team is very similar to the team that took the field last week. I thought as far as the players that were elevated last week, I thought Jock Brazel had a really, really good game on the edge. He's been confined to Jersey Flegg for much of this season. Of course, in a couple of years back, he lost the entire season due to injury. And really, I think last year was all about, I guess, finding his feet again. And now this season, he's warmed into the season. I spoke about a game that he had in the wet against the Sharks at Jersey Flegg a few weeks ago, and I said it was probably the best game I'd ever seen him play. Like, he was just absolutely ripping in and was super aggressive in his play. Had a really good captain's knock in that match, and I thought he brought his best football as well to New South Wales Cup last week. So I'm pleased to see him selected there again. Riley Smith, I spoke about him when it came to Jersey Flegg, but when he came on replacing Manny Luke last week, he scored a great solo try, ducking away from dummy half and then running around the fullback.
Then getting away for double knock-on, double movement to get the ball down.
That's it. So, look, and you spoke about the bench. Brock Parker's been a model of consistency. He's probably unlucky not to be a starting prop when all's said and done. So, and just hoping that we get some bigger minutes for Saxon this week, because he was on the bench last week but didn't get a huge number of minutes. Reece Alderton generally gets some good minutes off the bench as part of that middle rotation, but I'd like to see Saxon maybe come on. I'd like to see him get some first half time this week. So, and apart from that, look, the spine has been functioning quite well, and I'm sure you'd agree with me on this, John. I think we see the best of Zach Sini playing at fullback. He's a very good runner of the football. So you know that in yardage, in kick returns, and when he's given a chance to face a defender one-on-one, he makes it very hard for them to bring him down. So, and of course, when you look at the back line, we're going to expect to see Morgan Harper really play that senior player role. He had some very good run meters last week. It sort of snuck through without getting much attention, but I think he got around about the 150 run meters at centre last week. So I'd like to see a repeat of that, and I think that'll be important for the team to get the win. I'll tip the Eels to win this one based on their last meeting with South and also their overall form.
Yeah, I think the Eels should get the job done here. If they're serious about making a push towards the finals, as improbable as it was, a couple of months ago, this is one they have to have. And I think they've got the roster to do that. And like I said, you can catch this one out there, 5:20 p.m, Combank Stadium, Thursday night. Probably want to pack some warm clothes, though, I imagine, because the way the weather is right now, if I look at the Parramatta forecast, it's probably going to be pretty sharp tomorrow night. And they're saying a top of 16 degrees on Thursday night, which I imagine by the time the sun's gone down, that's probably going to be closer to single digits. So that sets the tone.
I think we'll be doing well if it's as high as 16 degrees at night time.
Yeah, I agree.
I can tell you, I don't live far from Parramatta, and it's been getting cold, damn cold
Very
at
cool.
night.
Yeah.
So,
yeah, but that sets the tone for first grade as the Parramatta Eels coming in second last. Care of the Roosters thumping the Tigers, hosting the South Sydney.
Roosters.
Yeah, the one time you cheer the tricolours. But they're hosting the 14th place South Sydney Rabbitohs, but don't look too closely at their position on the ladder because they've won 4 straight and they've also had 2 byes. So they've banked a whole ton of points on the ladder in the last 6 weeks. They're in some tremendous form relative to most of the competition because, geez, it's been a real flat competition. Even at the top, it feels like. This has been makes our struggles that much more frustrating, 60s, is how gettable it feels the competition is right now. But the Rabbitohs come to Parramatta as pretty warm favourites now. Sportsbet has them $1.64 to Parramatta's $2.27. No surprises there, I don't think. 7:50 p.m. kickoff tomorrow night. Catch us one on 9 Now, KO and Foxtel, of course, in person as well. Quickly go through the Rabbitohs lineup before we touch on our boys, because there is some big team news there. Latrell Mitchell, the centre of attention, has been named at fullback, as the club came out and gave him the backing to be their fullback for the near future at the very least. Hornby wasn't exactly convincing in his long-term vision of, I know he's not the long-term coach, but the long-term vision of Latrell at fullback, but he did say that for now he's their best fullback, which means Alex Johnston and Jacob Gagai are on the wings. Tane Milne and Richard Kenner are in the centres. I can only hope that Tane doesn't decapitate one of our players this week. One of the biggest loose cannons in the game is old Tane. Then you got Jack Whiten, who's a centre playing 5'8", as I'm told reliably by the South Sydney Rabbitohs. Partnering Cody Walker in the halves. Probably going to have a big game against us knowing that. Good old Jackie boy. Front row sees Davey Mawali and Sean Kepi as bookends to Damien Cook. Cam Murray captains the team on the edges alongside Jai Arrow on the other side. Keowan Kalol-Matangi is their lock forward. Big mountain of a player there, Kalol-Matangi. With Peter Marmazelis, Tallis Duncan, Tom Burgess and Michael Cheekham on the interchange. Extended roster, Gray, LeBlanc, Myers, Christensen and Fletcher. So all of our cup players there, who I would assume would be unavailable to play barring emergency, given that would have been taking place in the curtain raiser. Now for the Eels 60s, got a couple of big changes this week. Mike Azevo out for 6 weeks with a hammy injury, which pretty much will rule him out for most of the rest of the season, I'd imagine, given what's left for the Eels to play and what they might want to see from other players. But alongside that, we saw Hesi Makatoa dropping down to the reserve grade fixture, which means there are 2 spots available, which means 2 NRL debutants. We'll start, as always, at fullback with the captain, Quinton Gufferson. Jake Tungor, Eel 847, as he takes his place on the left wing. He'll partner Sean Russell down that side. Will Penasini and Blaze Telling will be on the right. Dillbags and Mitch Moses in the halves. Mitch was excellent against Newcastle Knights last week. Damn unlucky not to get the win on the back of his efforts. Then we see the front row, pretty much what we come to expect to be named on Tuesday, but maybe changing ahead of kickoff. Reagan Campbell-Gillard, Brendan Hands, Junior Barlaw, 8-10. Ryan Madison gets the start on the left edge. Bryce Cartwright on the right. Sean Lane starting at lock forward this week as Trent Barrett tinkers with his back row combinations. Lane start pushes Joe Ofahengaue back into the prop rotation on the interchange, where he will be alongside Matty Arthur, Matt Dory, and the Eels a little bit light in middle forwards because they've named Charlie Guymer to make his debut. Now, Charlie can play lock forward, of course, 60s, but he's not a prop. So it's going to be interesting to see if there's going to be further adjustments to the team ahead of kickoff. But that's how the Eels
look,
go.
I guess Ryan Madison can rotate into
True,
the middle.
you could bring Dury on or Charlie on and then put Matto into the middle. That makes sense. But rounding out the Eels roster, RC Makatoa, Greg Harper and Moretti. Liam Kennedy is going to be the focus of our eye this week for any bad calls. With Belinda Sharp, Dave Munro running the sidelines, Adam G in the box. Look, the bar's been set pretty low for Liam this week after what we saw last week. I'm just hoping for a reasonably called game. That's all I'm saying.
Are you gonna start me again, mate? Are you gonna start me talking about the match officials?
You're talking about setting up officials for failure. I feel like I'm doing it on the previews by saying surely they'll call a good game. But yeah, Liam the man of the whistle this week. And all I ask is that you call a fairly even game. I understand the odd call going against the Parramatta Eels.
Yeah. Okay. So look at it. The two teams, without question, the South Sydney back row, and I'm including the lock with that in Murray, Arrow, and Kalol-Matangi. I mean, that's their quality players.
Class.
Obviously, players like Mitchell and Walker and Whiten, when they're on, they're match winners. So they've got the Bunnies have got strike power in that team, and obviously they're functioning as strike weapons too because they're getting the results. Now, we look at our Eels, and I mean, we're providing this podcast for Eels supporters so that, you know, our listeners know all too well what we've been going through, not just in recent weeks, but this season. Now, when you look at the names on paper of our pack, and I'm not including Brendan Hands in this because I'm going to just mainly focus on the forwards, not the spine. So Regan Campbell-Gillard, Junior Paulo, Ryan Madison, Bryce Cartwright, Sean Lane. Now, when we look at those names and we compare it to the South Sydney pack, on paper you go, well, that's a winning pack. But we haven't been functioning as a winning pack. And that's the unfortunate part. Defence hasn't been good. We just haven't been winning the middle. It's as straightforward as that. So we have patches where we do, but as we see every week, if we had, I think there's been something written on it before, but if we had a competition table for where the Eels would be if games went for 40 minutes and it was a half-time score, we'd be a lot further up the table than what we are. Mm-hmm. Unfortunately, when we tend to hit that 50 to 65-minute mark, it falls apart. And it's been consistently that way this year. Now, people have suggested that it's a fitness thing. It might also be that it's a headspace thing. Just staying focused at the time of the game when matches are decided. And unfortunately, we haven't measured up in that regard. And we've continued to concede far too many points. So the only way that we're going to turn this around is to fix up the issues that we've had in defence, and we can make our job easier in defence by completing our sets and not handing over opportunities. And unfortunately, last week we got punished in the strongest possible way when we made errors, that we were basically giving up length of the field tries on our errors in attack. So it's the most basic football that we can play is to make sure that we keep those errors down, make it easier on our defence so that we can concede less points. And I don't think I can be any more basic than that, John.
Yeah. It's not a difficult equation, isn't it, or a complex equation. The Eels, like you said, if games were concluding at half time this year, the Eels would be well into the top four, I'm pretty certain. They've had really strong starts to a lot of their games, but they've had massive second half fades and big defensive blowouts. And those two things are just such a potent cocktail for finding a way to lose games. So it's going to fall on the players to either get out to such an unassailable lead that they can afford to have a little bit of a wind-down period in the second half, or find the extra gear they've been missing this year and just lock it in.
Yeah, and look, a bit has been said from that Michael Chamis article of Mitch Moses, the words that he said in the dressing room. But there is a truth that the players, when it comes down to it, they're the ones that are going to have to find a way to win, because they've been in a position to win so many games this year, haven't been able to do it. And look, we've acknowledged, especially last week, that there were things that were out of their control. Luck wasn't going their way. The officiating was, well, we've said it was diabolical. Graham Annesley doesn't think it was diabolical, but we think it was diabolical. But by the same token, if the Eels didn't look in the mirror after last week and say, there's a hell of a lot we should have done better, well, they're not going to turn things around. They need to be able to focus on those basics of rugby league that I just mentioned, fix that up. Because look, the Eels have proven that they've got points in them. But unfortunately, what they've proven is other teams have got more points in them this year because we just haven't defended well. And, unless we can change that, we'll see more of the same this week. So I guess the thing is, John, can we find that something extra this week? What do you think?
It's interesting, isn't it? Because the way that game ended against Newcastle, it could be a bit of a spark point for them, a flash point for them to get over the hump and get that big result against the team on the rise in the Rabbitohs, or it could cause them to drop back into a funk. I really don't know which way it's going to go because obviously the backdrop to all this is all the talk about the Eels have now locked in their coach of the future, but they haven't announced it. So you've had Trent Barrett coming out saying that he thinks it'd be for the best for the club to just announce who's got the job so everyone can move on and move forwards in regards to both the players here and players coming to the club. So I don't know. Does this galvanise the team? Is this a flashpoint? I'd like to hope so because Mitchell Moses being fired up, that for mine is the best Mitchell Moses, the best iteration of him when he's a player that, you hear it all the time, but he is one of those guys, wears his heart in his sleeve, plays with his hair on fire to the point where he almost gets himself in trouble sometimes. I think he was perilously close to getting sent off last week for giving the ref an absolute verbal for what was admittedly a very poor decision. But there was a very angry gesticulating from Mitchell, and I think he had to get calmed down. But I still think that's where he's at his best, when he's really fired up and he's humming and pushing the line. So I'm hoping that's going to be the difference, is that Moses is in his element. He's got Origin on his mind. He's got dragging his team to a win on his mind. And I think that may be enough, maybe, if other elements of the team, come to the fore and give them the support to get the Eels over in what will probably be a high-scoring game again.
Yeah, and what we know we're going to see is some decent minutes for players that we want to see minutes for. Because when you look at the starting team, the starting pack, and then you look at the bench and you go, okay, there's going to have to be the rotation, and that's going to mean that, for example, Matt Dury's going to see some fairly decent minutes. Charlie Guymer on debut should be seeing good minutes.
Trent gave Matty Alpha 28 minutes last week, so he's showing that he's not afraid to put a rookie into the cauldron, into the battle zone out there.
I think we'll see similar sorts of minutes for Budsy this week, and I guess we can expect Joe Offengowie to probably start in place of Junior, as tends to be the case every week. So, we know that those middles between Reagan Campbell-Gillard, Junior Paulo, Joe Offengowie, they're going to all get a fairly solid 50 minutes at least, you would think, of game time each. So I guess it comes down to the rotation with Ryan Madison and Sean Lane as well. So with Lane playing at 13, maybe he also has time off the field rather than playing 80 minutes in the back row. And I think that's where we need to see Sean Lane. He'd surely be the first to acknowledge that he's had a very, very average year. And I think we've seen some of his better football when he's been playing in the middle, or some of his more encouraging football when he's been in the middle. I just think he's lost confidence, he's lost timing on the edge. I think he's a middle footballer now, and seeing him named at 13 is probably, I think, the best option for Sean at this stage of his career. So anyway, I guess we're at the point now where we give our tips.
Yeah, let's get into it, mate. Whew. So, South Sydney, the team, or one of the teams that have had for so long Parramatta's measure. Eels broke that curse last year, but then paid for it dearly, as it turns out. So, who knows what tomorrow has in store for our boys. You got to be positive, though, because I thought the signs against Newcastle were good. I thought they played real tough. Yeah, they missed some tackles, but the scoreline belied the effort. And if you take away the two length of the field against run of play tries to Bradman Best, the Eels were the better team, even considering the officiating calls. So going to back them to back up. Oh, scoreline, though. It's probably going to be, as I said before, a high-scoring one, so maybe 34-26 to the Parramatta Eels. I don't know how you see this one, mate, but I can't see us getting a neat and tidy win, unfortunately.
No, I think as spectators in the stand, we're going to have moments of agony during this game.
Oh, yeah.
You know, there will be, we'll be closing our eyes and wincing in pain at mistakes and decisions, and it'll probably be not dissimilar to what we saw last week, where we will have periods of hope, periods of despair. Look, a lot comes down to which South Sydney team turns up, because I think we're going to see a similar Eels team turn up to the one that turned up at Newcastle, especially as it's a home game. So South have long been the Eels' bogey team because of the way that they are able to shift the ball to the wings. And they've had success, not just against the Eels, but against defences of literally every other team when they do that, because it's almost like they fan out in a way that teams find it hard to number up against. And it's an interesting exercise looking at them doing it. And I think some of the best vision of how they've done that over the years is that end-on vision, where you can see them working their numbers into especially the side of the field, the left side of the field with Johnson. I mean, he doesn't have that try-scoring record by fluke. And we know he's a very good player, but geez, he's also scored a lot of tries, not just against Parramatta, but against all teams, where he's just had to catch the ball and stroll over. So he's obviously capable of doing much more than that, but there's also a lot where that's all he's had to do because of the space they've been able to create. Now, I'm not so sure that they can do that as well, but I think they're really going to chance their hand against Parramatta. And like all teams are doing this year, they'll do that from their own half. So I'm expecting South to spread that ball to try to find some joy against the Eels' wings. How we are able to deal with that in both halves of the field, both in South's half and in our half, is going to determine how this goes. We will leak points. Of that I'm certain.
Yep.
And I think we will leak a lot of points. It comes down to how committed South are defensively, what South Sydney team turns up. So it will be high scoring, I believe. I'm if I'm going to be positive about this, I'm going to go with a similar sort of score line to you, with the Eels being in the 30s, with South being in the high 20s. Who knows? The weather could change all of that. The forecast is for quite a bit of rain tomorrow, so maybe it doesn't get up like that. But at this stage, I'd be thinking it's going to be something like 34-28 to the Eels. But again, it comes down to what South Sydney team is going to turn up. If you got that really committed team that has a belief that they probably still have the belief that they can play finals football, the Bunnies. And if they have the belief they can play finals football, then they would be seeing the Eels as a team that they must beat. And I really don't think they'll be complacent against us, John.
No way.
So, so anyway, let's move on with who we think will be the Eels' first try scorer and the predicted best on field. John, I'll let you go first.
Yeah, I mean, didn't get to toot my horn about it, but I did get FTS right last week. I went with Blaze and got the against the all odds, given the weight of possession for the Knights. Got it right. I will go for a Quentin Gufferson cutout pass to Jake Tungor this week to get the rookie over first on the try scorer sheet.
Good call. Yep. And your predicted best on field?
I mean, realistically, we're not winning this game without a 8, 9 or 10 out of 10 from Mitchell Moses, so he's right up there, obviously. Going away from Mitch, I've had to look for another candidate. Maybe Bryce Cartwright, if he's okay with that chest injury, because the ribs are just such a bastard of an injury to carry throughout a heavy contact sport like the NRL. If he is back to anything resembling okay fitness, I think he could be a big factor in this game.
Mate, you've almost been working a bit blue this week, talking about shit shows and bastards and what have you.
Rib cartilage injuries, they're no joke, mate. I do not envy Bryce. I think my use of, or colourful use of language would be a drop in a bucket compared to some of the stuff he might have uttered in his, I'll use quote-unquote rehabilitation, because there isn't really a rehab when you're playing through it. That is not a fun injury.
Yeah, well, I'm still wondering now whether we need a dump button on our recording.
We might.
Look, I'm going to go in a slightly different direction to you, because I don't disagree with your thoughts about who's likely to have big games, but I'm gonna go for Junior, because look, I think what he went through last week in terms of the ridiculous abuse from the stands, it may have that impact of firing him up. And I don't think, and don't get me wrong, I don't think that's a reason to go hurl an abuse at your own players. I just do not think that's the realm of supporters. And I understand supporters are passionate about their team and they get upset if they don't think players are playing at their best. But people have to realise that there's a whole combination of factors that go into a team not performing well, and there are a whole combination of factors at play with the Parramatta Eels this season.
Mm-hmm.
And, you're not going to get, even though I'm suggesting Junior may well bounce back this week, you're not gonna get positives out of being abusive towards players. You just put a real chasm between supporters and the playing group, and that's not a good thing. You want everyone pulling together in these sorts of times, not people waging war against each other. And that's essentially what we're seeing a bit of these days. So, yes, we'll be critical of performances, but let's not get into the realms of abusing people, because that's not a good thing. So, look, I'm expecting a big game from Junior. And, look, I think he may well be the difference maker in this game. As for first try scorer, you know what? I might go again for a player who I was critical of in terms of his performance last week, because I expect that he is a much better player than what we saw, and that's Will Penasini. I thought a lot went wrong for Will last week. I think, again, he'll have a point to prove to himself as much as anything else, and I'll take him for first try scorer this week.
Nice.
So, mate, that brings to an end 4 grades previewed. How are we going time-wise, mate?
59 and a half minutes as we utter those words there. So pretty good for our standards.
Mate, I think that's outstanding. So maybe we can find something else to talk about for 20 minutes.
Oh, please. Let's bulk out the runtime. That's exactly what this podcast needs. No, I think we managed to stay on track in the final quarter of play as well, which is exactly what we want to see from our boys tomorrow night. And so, obviously, if the podcast is in good form, surely the team is. But yeah, we'll be out there barracking for the boys, and you can catch us prior to kickoff, 5 o'clock. We'll be in the bistro live with David Lydiard, our special guest, and one of our favourite guests on the tip sheet. Absolutely wonderful gentleman, Lids. Was a great play for the Eels, and even better man off the field. So if you want to catch up with us and Lids and ask some questions and catch up with one of the great former Eels, be out there in the bistro 5 o'clock PM, and then otherwise we'll catch you guys over at the stadium, where hopefully the Eels will bag 2 wins tomorrow night.
Yes, and before we go, thank you to Star Partners Real Estate, Auburn, Narellan and Parramatta. They're not only supporters of the Cumberland Throw, but they're big Eels supporters. So on that note, as always, go you mighty Eels.